Hi everyone, so as I said when I made my hummus earlier, I'm back to show you how to make some really simple flatbreads. So this is something you can get kids doing, takes very simple ingredients, so hopefully you'll have these bits and bobs at home. What you will need is plain flour. I've got 200 grams here. You will need some salt, you'll need some olive oil, and you'll also need some water. Now with the olive oil, if you're running low on that for any reason, by all means use some veg or sunflower oil as well. Rapeseed oil works pretty well too. Some of that will be used for kneading, the rest of it will be used for frying off our flatbreads when they're ready. So I've got my 200 grams here, and into that I'm going to pop a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I'm just using sea salt here, but regular table salt is absolutely fine. Then we're going to start to incorporate some liquid. So we're probably looking at about 100 mils, 100 grams of liquid. But what we want to do is just incorporate the liquid quite slowly. So I'm going to pop it on the scales and I'm just going to put some of the water in. So I think I'm going to go initially for 50. And I'm just going to use my dough scraper. You could use a spatula as well for this, but a dough scraper is a great little tool and one of my favourites. Anyone who's been to one of my classes will know that I speak very highly of a dough scraper. But I'm just going to start mixing that through. And as you can see, it's really dry. So I know I can start popping some more in there. So drop more. And again, just bringing that together. Using your dough scraper or spatula, just to start bringing it into a dough. Now what we want with this dough is for it to be firm, but with a bit of a pillowy texture to it. We don't want it too soft because then it's going to be really hard to work with later on. And as you can see, I just do this quite gradually. You can always pop more liquid in, you can't take it out again. So, more again. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I'm happy I've got the right consistency. As you can see now, it's starting to come together. Now what you will notice is, as wonderful as your dough scraper is, it does attach quite a lot of sticky dough to it. So grab yourself a table knife and just clean down your dough scraper or your spatula as you go. You can do this with your hands, but as you can imagine, it's a little bit sticky towards the end, but you can see I'm cutting into that now, being quite rough with it. But this gives me an idea of where I've got the stickier areas of the dough, but I've also got some quite dry areas, to which I'm now going to really carefully add some more liquid. I don't want this to get overly sticky. And I think one more splash should do. Yes, that's done it. So now, once you've got your dough formed in the bowl, it will still look pretty rough. You can then move your scales away, clear yourself some space, and we're going to start kneading this. Now I'm just going to do it directly on the counter, but you can do it in the bowl as well. And I'm just going to pour olive oil directly onto the counter. That's probably a really hearty teaspoon. And then I'm going to put my dough onto it. Anyone who's also been to a class will know we do love a clean bowl, so scrape down as well as you can. Just means all of that's not going to end up down the sink. So just pop that time in. And then I'm going to start kneading this. So initially, I'm just going to give it a little gentle roll over in the oil. And then there's no real technique for this, but I just want to keep working it until it's nice and soft. So everyone, as you can see, I've been kneading this probably now for a couple of minutes, and it started to become much more structured, not so sticky. As you can see, the counter is starting to look nice and clean, or hopefully you can see that. Right everyone, so our flatbread dough has been resting for about half an hour. And you can uncover that. And it's just settled down and it's ready to go. So what I suggest you do is weigh your total dough. That way you can divide it up into equal pieces. I'm going to make mine into roughly 4. I've already weighed mine, so I know they need to be about 80 grams each. I'll just ease that out of the bowl and onto the counter. And then put on the scales, and I want my 80 gram pieces. So I'm just going to chop away until I get those right. A little touch more. And ultimately, if you don't want them to be the same size, they don't have to be. But it's quite nice to have something evenly sized to work with. Tiny bit more again. And then, in principle, the last 2 pieces should be easy, straight by eye. Let's see if I can get this right. No. And then I'll double check my work on the last one. Perfect. Okay, so you can pop pieces to one side whilst you work on the first. And we need to get this into a very rough ball shape first of all. So you will need a little flour on the counter. That's just going to stop sticking. And this is just strong white bread flour. If you've just got plain to hand, you can use that. And we're going to start rolling. Now, first of all, it's going to want to resist whatever you're doing to it. And you might find you want to flip it over as well. But make sure you keep turning it as you go. And a little bit of flour is going to help you in terms of getting it off the counter. So keep an eye. But we're trying to get these to be nice and round. But ultimately, they're homemade, so it's all good. But just keep working the dough. If you find it starting to stick a little too much, then just grab some of the residual flour first before you start popping loads more on the counter. We don't want to waste loads of flour if we don't have to. And also we don't want to make them overly floury because it can make them a little dry. But you can see I'm starting to get this nice and thin. And again, the thickness of your flatbread is a little bit of personal taste as well. So if you find you like them that little bit thicker and maybe slightly doughier, go for it, make them thicker and go ahead that way. So now I've got my first flatbread. I'm just gonna pop a little bit of flour to one side. Just let that rest for a moment whilst I get the hob on the go. So I'm gonna go for a medium heat with this. I've put a splosh or 2 of olive oil in the pan and then wiped it out with a piece of kitchen paper, just so we've got a thin coating in there. So medium heat, and whilst that's just warming up, I'm going to move on to my next one. And again, I'm just going to take some flour that's already on the counter to get me started, and then I can decide if I need more. So yeah, I definitely need a little more there. Just a light. A little pat on top, so it just helps with the rolling. And you can see here that it will start to roll out quickly. You can see it sticking to the pin there, so I'm just going to flip it over onto its other side, make my job easier. And that's what this is all about. You don't want this to be a real chore. And kids can do this too, so you can even use flattening out with hands. It doesn't have to be with a rolling pin. And you can see I've got a little crease there. I'm not too concerned because I know I can roll that crease away as I go. So I can already smell now that the oil in the pan is starting to heat up, and on that basis I'm going to leave this one to one side, and I'm just going to flip my first one into the pan, like so. Now your first one is always going to be a slight test because you're waiting to see if you've got that temperature just right, and that's going to depend on a few factors, including the thickness of your pan. I can see starting to get a slight translucency to it, so that's a good sign. Now this one is pretty much ready to go as well, so I'm going to pop that to one side and move on. So I think I need a touch more heat here. We want that to get a slight bubbliness to it. But meanwhile, I can take another piece of dough, roll it out, and then what you might want to do is just grab yourself perhaps a pair of tongs, and it will just give you the chance to flip it over and see how it's going. So I know these need a little longer because they've got completely no colour there. So I'm just going to pop that to one side while I carry on with this. I certainly need more flour. But now I can see they're starting to puff. So at this point, I'm going to just grab it and flip it over. Let it start cooking out on the other side. But as you can see, I'm quite amazed that I'm multitasking here. I'm very proud of myself. And just going to keep these rolling to the shape that I want. And who says a flatbread has to be round? No one. So I'm going to get that into the position I want. So I can feel it slightly thicker in one area, in which case I can work on that to get the shape that I want. So I'm going to pop that to one side. Check my bread. So I've got that nice colour there. But now I'm just going to flip it back over to the other side and watch that puff up. And you'll see that translucency fade away again. When that happens, it means that it's actually cooked the dough through, and that's basically what you're looking for. So now I'm going to lower the heat a little. You can also just press down slightly with your tongs or whatever you're using, just to make sure that your bread is as you want it to be. And then simply pop each one onto a plate. You can cover that with a tea towel, and then they'll be ready to serve when all of your flatbreads are done. So I'm just going to get another one in, but I'm hoping you'll love the taste of these. And happy baking, cooking, and enjoy.